Did you know that this is an emulator? This is an emulator? This one too. These are all emulators. Emulation is one of the greatest ways we can preserve games and hardware that are not easily obtainable anymore. Tons of people working insane amounts of hours have developed systems for every conceivable console of yesterday that allow us to play games incredibly easily. Grassroots community movements are the reason we can play games from 30 plus years ago. I know I grew up with early emulators, and they provided access to games I never even imagined existing. We talk about the classics like it's obvious that everyone should know about them and have experienced them, but I didn't know Final Fantasy VII was a thing. Nobody bought me a copy. I had to discover it later, when it was too late to buy from a store shelf. Depreciated consoles that are no longer sold or supported have been retooled to be emulation machines by some very smart people. With little know-how and some bravery, this 3DS can be my one-stop shop for games that have never officially released on it. I don't personally have any emulation software currently running on any of my consoles, but I have friends who can't get enough of it. But this presents a conundrum. Not everyone is willing to take the necessary steps to fundamentally change this piece of hardware into something entirely different. There are good reasons for this. One, and probably the biggest, is the work it might take to get it running. Then, the fear of breaking a console that can't easily be replaced anymore. But if you've been a part of the channel for any length of time, you know there's another, lesser known reason. If we're trying to preserve games as they are, to work as best as they can in the future, doesn't changing these consoles go against that principle? You know how you can go to the library and take out a movie from like 80 years ago? Yeah, you can't really do that with old games. Libraries make pushes to add relevant consoles and games to their current collections, and if you didn't know already, your local library probably lends out either a Nintendo Switch or a collection of games for it. But you're not borrowing a PlayStation 2 game. Heck, you're probably not even borrowing an Xbox 360 game anymore. Here's an important and aggravating moment in recent events you may know about. In 2024, the US Copyright Office told the Video Game History Foundation that they are not exempt from the DMCA, essentially curtailing their efforts to produce digital game preservation programs. Why? Because they thought it would be used for recreational purposes. You know, video games. For fun. And as an individual who cares about video games, when you hear something like that, it gets you pretty annoyed. Because there's no good reason other than for money. Publishers do not care about game preservation, they care about making money. And there is no money in preserving history, something libraries know all too well. Some game companies, to their credit, have made attempts to make emulation, while not free, accessible. The Nintendo Virtual Console is a good example of this. I mean, remember the celebrations when not only Earthbound but Mother 1 were available on the Virtual Console for the first time? This was exciting news, but let's put this into perspective. Technically, anyone could have been playing Earthbound on an emulator years before this. But let's not forget when Nintendo finally released a platform to play Nintendo 64 games on the Switch as part of their subscription service, and released an emulated version of The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time that was somehow inferior to not only already available emulated copies, but the original version from 1998. It is not hyperbole to say that if you were able to play your copy of Zelda on the original console, you would have had a better experience. So why do we get excited when companies offer us emulated games for a cost, especially when they are often imperfect? The same reason why digital video games have skyrocketed in the last decade: accessibility. You don't have to leave your house. You don't have to search for a copy. You don't have to wait in line. In the case of emulation, you don't have to make a few suspicious Google searches. A couple of clicks later and the game is downloading. And for the indefinite foreseeable future, this game is yours to play whenever you want. For a lot of people, this is more than enough of a reason. But we've seen the absolutely ridiculous pictures of those collector's editions of games that come with a game case, but no disc. Some of them have the audacity to have a paper cutout in the shape of a disc, as if to say, yeah, we know something should be here, but here's the code to borrow our game for a while. You have to give it back one day though. Also, the game has a day one patch that fixes some very big bugs. But the game won't actually be in tip-top shape for a few months, because we're still fixing it. Anyway, please buy our $40 season pass, because the first DLC comes out in a couple of weeks. The GOG Preservation Program is an attempt by a prominent games distributor to preserve games in a few important ways. 1. Their games are DRM free. 2. They keep them updated to work on modern hardware, which is a huge barrier to playing some very old games, especially ones that were released on PCs. This is a monumental and admirable task that deserves praise. But we also have to be realistic. GOG is a digital games distributor. One day, whether it's 5 years from now or 20 years, they will shut down, and their preservation program will be in limbo. Best case scenario, there will be a gigantic collection of games that remain accessible offline. Worst case, the publishers that allowed them to work on these games refuse access, or the games just eventually stop working. Steam recently updated the text surrounding purchases, so that they are more upfront about the fact that you do not own any game in their library, you purchase a license to play a game. While Steam is likely going nowhere for quite a while, again, one day it will change or disappear. New ownership will not hold the same ideals, and will make catastrophically damaging changes to how games are used on their platform. In my opinion, playing games on original hardware is the best way to play them. It is the intended way by the developers for lots of reasons, from more ephemeral aspects like feel and vibe, to specific technical specifications regarding hardware. This is why remasters of older games can sometimes feel off, or look different in a bad way. Emulators don't fix this issue. I'm sure many of us have troubleshooting stories of trying to get that one game to work just right. Emulators for more modern consoles are still trying to perfect their capabilities. Just take a look at how Bloodborne works on an emulator today versus a year ago. But emulators allow games to remain accessible, whether it be for preservation's sake or even for legitimate accessibility needs, like button mapping, and being able to use a wider variety of controllers. Emulation is one of the greatest achievements in game preservation we have ever made. But original hardware deserves to exist, and should be allowed to be preserved by institutions with positive interests. Ultimately, it doesn't really matter which path you take to playing games. The best way to play a game is the one that makes you the happiest. Just be aware that one day, all of those digital copies you bought will be gone. If you made it to the end, thanks for listening. Please give the video a like and the channel a follow, and I'll see you next time.